Good morning, and thank you for joining us again today. I will host a Zoom conversation about the topic of this sermon at 4 o'clock this evening, and I'll post the link to that Zoom right at the bottom of where you pick this up, either off of YouTube or on Facebook. This will be the last time that we have a Sunday Zoom. Starting next weekend, we're going to resume Sunday morning services. And so it takes us a few hours to process our videos. So we won't be able to have a general discussion group on Sundays again for a while. But if you live in the Springfield area, I certainly hope that you will come and visit us during that resumption of Sunday services. Adding a kind of existential element to the old movie title, Waiting to Exhale, we have all breathed a sigh of relief on Tuesday afternoon when the verdict was read in the Derek Chauvin trial. After a 2-week-long trial, during which those of us who are a little too addicted to the news witnessed over and over bits of video of Derek Chauvin kneeling on the neck of the, honestly, already dead George Floyd in Minneapolis last May. For all of us, the verdict came, if not a cause for celebration, because you can't really celebrate aspects of a murder or someone going to prison, but still a moral and existential kind of relief. It was a case of police brutality that turned into murder, and it was witnessed by children and professionals who pled with Chauvin to just get off of his neck and to start CPR, to check for a pulse. Expert witnesses explained what was obvious to all of us who are not experts and have no training in the field, that Floyd died not from his pre-existing health conditions, drug use, or anything else. He was deprived of air, which, as it turns out, will kill any one of us. He was choked to death by members of the police force whose motto is to protect and to serve. We were waiting to exhale because, as many black community leaders have said, we've seen this movie before. Lots of evidence, videos, witnesses, and still the police usually are either found to be not guilty or in many cases, the grand jury just doesn't even charge them. I kept assuring my more cynical friends that there is no way that Chauvin is going to walk from this one. There's just too much evidence. But every time I said it, I felt myself cringe a little bit, silently praying that, well, we have seen this movie before, and I hope it doesn't turn out that way. No one can rationally celebrate in a case like this. George Floyd is still dead. The court system can only do so much to give justice to his memory, but at least they did what they could in this case. We're not guaranteed that they'll do it again. The trial of the 3 other officers involved in this incident will come up in June, and we can only hope that this at least sets a new direction. We can't say much more than that in this case, the dark wall of injustice has been cracked. But it's going to take a lot more hammer blows for that wall to be broken. I'm relatively certain that all of you who listen to my sermons will have spent some time listening to some of the evidence during the trial. You saw a large black man with his hands handcuffed behind his back, with his face down in the pavement, with Chauvin's knee on his neck, as he pleaded for his life, telling him, "I can't breathe," and finally even calling out for his deceased mother to help him. But folks, I want to take you back 11 months to May 25th of last year, before the video went viral. before the police officers involved were fired under public pressure and before Derek Chauvin was charged. The day after Chauvin had murdered George Floyd in the street, the Minneapolis Police Department released this statement. And I'm going to ask you to give me 2 minutes to read it aloud because I think we need to hear the whole thing. Press release from the Minneapolis Police Department, May 26, 2020. On Monday evening, shortly after 8 p.m., officers from the Minneapolis Police Department responded to the 3700 block of Chicago Avenue South on a report of a forgery in progress. Officers were advised that the suspect was sitting on top of a blue car and appeared to be under the influence. 2 officers arrived and located the suspect, a male believed to be in his 40s, in his car. He was ordered to step from his car. After he got out, he physically resisted officers. Officers were able to get the suspect into handcuffs and noted he appeared to be suffering medical distress. Officers called for an ambulance. He was transported to the Hennepin County Medical Center by ambulance, where he died a short time later. At no time were weapons of any type used by anyone involved in this incident. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension has been called in to investigate this incident at the request of the Minneapolis Police Department. No officers were injured in this incident. Body-worn cameras were on and activated during this incident. The Minneapolis police gave themselves several hours to concoct an account of the murder of George Floyd that sounded like there's nothing to see here. They made it sound like they were almost sympathetic, that this was just so unfortunate, that he was just having a medical incident when they were trying to question him. We know that George Floyd had been dead for the last 5 minutes that Chauvin was kneeling on his neck. But the police, in their official press release, said that the police intervened, called an ambulance, sent him to the hospital, and later he died at the hospital. Chauvin was found guilty of murder, but there were 4 officers involved in the incident. There was a dispatcher who was watching on video. There were other members of the police force who were aware of this while it was happening, and when it was all over, their official officers wrote this piece of fiction to try to convince the public that these helpful officers had noticed with deep concern that he was having a medical incident, and they acted to save his life, but sadly, he died in spite of their best efforts. So folks, what have we learned from this incident? I don't like this. I don't like to have to say it. But I need to ask you to think about what we have learned from this and a whole series of killings of unarmed black, mostly men, but some women, in police custody. Now, I want to tell you confessionally, very honestly, that in the summer of 1995, when the trial of OJ Simpson was being televised, when I heard that LA detective Mark Furman was accused of planting evidence intended to frame OJ Simpson, I just thought that was the silliest thing I'd ever heard. A detective tries to find out what happened. Who did it? They don't manufacture evidence to frame someone. Now, let me be quick to say, I am absolutely convinced that O.J. Simpson did murder his ex-wife and her friend. But I also had to come to the awareness that Mark Furman was a racist who was determined to frame Simpson by spreading blood in his car, on his clothes, on his glove, to make it impossible to not convict him. I don't know if you're old enough to remember that trial or if it occupied as much of your attention at the time as it did mine, but I had to just simmer in the juices of the OJ trial for a couple of years to be able to pierce the fiction of police nobility. And there was just 3 years before the OJ Simpson murder that we had seen a video of the police beating Rodney King nearly to death. And that had been captured by a video camera, and the 4 officers involved were acquitted of all wrongdoing. And we had all seen them do it. I was one of the people who initially was prepared to believe that they must have had some compelling reason to use that kind of brutal force. Something that didn't show up in the video, something that happened before then that made them behave that way. Because I was programmed from preschool days to see the police as being our helpers. They protected us from crime. They were the ones we were supposed to run towards when we are scared. Of course, I spent my preschool and elementary school years in a all-white segregated school, but still, I was effectively programmed to believe, to trust them. Mind you, I was a war protester in high school. I knew that Richard Nixon was lying about Vietnam, but the police, that didn't even occur to me. And I should be quick to say that they don't always lie. They're not always evil. You might even want to argue that most are good public servants. It would take you some work to convince me of that, but I'll grant you that many do good work and that I don't want to be without them entirely. But will they lie to cover up their own crimes? You bet they will. I would even say almost in every instance. So when I ask you, what have we learned? I hope that I can hear your hearts whispering, question authority. I hope that you can see that you set your jaw to simply refuse to believe propaganda without evidence. Notice when they release the body cam video and when they don't. When they behaved well, the body cam video is made available immediately. When they've got something to hide, they come up with some reason not to release the video, which only creates suspicion, and then when they have to release it, it confirms the suspicion. As the famous actor Will Smith said about 5 years ago, racism is not getting worse, it's just getting filmed. In 1991, when video cameras were first becoming common, I bought my first one in 1989 when I adopted my daughter. Like most parents, I wanted to video every moment. So when we got this video of the beating of Rodney King, it was from one of those cameras at a distance, cameras that were bigger than a shoebox, shooting the video from far away. So it wasn't that clear. But then the advent 25 years later of video recorders in our pockets, where we've all got one, whether you've got a little baby at the house or not, that makes it possible for any witness to create a reliable video of whatever incident you are observing. There was a 17-year-old girl there who recorded on her cell phone Floyd's death. Chauvin threatened to pepper spray her if she didn't stop videoing. And you should all know you have a legal right to video record a police officer at work. But she didn't lower her phone. Say what you will about Facebook, and there's a lot of things to say about Facebook, but she posted that video on social media, it went viral, and the lies that I read to you from the Minneapolis Police Department fell apart with an eyewitness video of what actually happened. Without her courageous action, I am afraid that you and I might never have even heard of George Floyd. And had it not been for the person who videoed the execution of Walter Scott in North Charleston a few years ago when a policeman shot him in the back as he tried to run for his life, if that hadn't been videoed, we might never have heard of him. None of the police on the scene had the courage to just tell the truth about what happened. That's heartbreaking. That's heartbreaking. Because you know there's a bad apple here and there. But were 100% of the police on site that day bad apples? Can we keep using that language if it's common rather than rare? Everyone standing on the sidewalk was asking for them to stop it. The police never wavered. Undoubtedly, every one of those people had a cell phone in their pocket and they could have recorded it, but it was just this teenage girl who did it. She saved George Floyd's memory, and she led all of us in a pathway towards justice. Now, when I say that she had courage, it should be said that she had to have courage in the face of a police officer who was murdering one large black man who was threatening to use violence against her. She had courage then, but then she also testified in court during the trial. And what I want you to understand now is that her life is at risk, which is why I'm not going to show you a picture of her and why I'm not going to say her name. And I wish that the news media would show her the same deference. She deserves our praise and adoration, but she doesn't deserve to have a target drawn on her, which I'm afraid the media is doing now. She had the courage to put her life on the line to speak truth to power, and we should all try to protect her from the many white supremacists who would now take any opportunity they could find to kill her. Harvard professor Cornel West regularly reminds us that justice is what love looks like in public. Because love is a verb. It is something that you do. You may feel love, but primarily, meaningful love is not just something that you feel. Because love does involve risk. Love requires courage. To love someone means you are giving up some part of yourself. When we started this church in 2008, we took as our motto that famous quote from the Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel, "Thou shalt not stand idly by." We cannot hope for justice if we want to remain neutral in the presence of injustice. Silence never creates justice. Silence is always interpreted as tacit support for the oppressors. The powerful will never give justice to the weak out of the goodness and generosity of their hearts. Presidents will lie, the police will lie, and though I hate to say it, denominations, bishops, popes, and pastors will lie to make their worst crimes seem either benign or unavoidable. It was several years ago now, but I recommend this book to you that David first recommended to me, though the title tells you a lot of what you would learn from either reading it or listening to the audio version. Mistakes were made, but not by me. And we find that presidents and the police and the church and governments and sometimes your best friends will tell you the same thing. Mistakes were made. I just wasn't involved. Because we all have a way of cleaning up our memory so that we become the hero of our own novels. And we have ways of telling our life story that make us appear to be either completely innocent of wrongdoing or, You made me do it. Circumstances forced me into this. No matter how close we were to the horrible events that we want to describe ourselves as being almost people watching through the rear window. Even if you were not the one making the mistake, I want to tell you, if you stand idly by, you are a part of the propaganda that insists that no one is responsible. Remember how the police said this. The police were just questioning him about a counterfeit bill when they noticed that he was having a medical problem. What we have learned when we compare what we know about how George Floyd did die with what the police told us in May is that you cannot believe what the police say. It seems unavoidable to me that we all have to assume a certain posture of questioning authority. Now, I don't want to encourage you to be paranoid. There's way too much of that in the world. And I don't even want you to mistake cynicism for being a sacrament. Cynicism doesn't make you smart. Cynicism, you being personally cynical, does not undo the statements of the police or anybody else. I'm just saying that we all have to accept that we now know that we need evidence if there is a question to a story. That governments will lie to cover their own tracks, the police will lie, Wall Street bankers sure will lie, the media lies daily, and the church will lie to you whenever it benefits them to do so. Sometimes your most trusted friends will lie when they need to assure you of their own innocence. Mistakes were made, but not by me. So I want to suggest to you today that the sacrament of the progressive church must be something other than a ritual. It has to be something more than a religious text or candles or grape juice and crackers. It needs to be, our sacrament needs to be critical thinking. There's a Buddhist tradition that says that when the Buddha was enlightened and began to wander about India teaching, that people would ask him, "Are you a god?" And he said, "No." So they asked him, "Are you a reincarnation of a god?" "No," he said. "Are you a wizard then?" "No." "Are you a man?" "No." "So what are you?" The Buddha, according to this tradition, simply replied, "I am awake." Religion really can be the scales over our eyes that keep us from seeing the truth. Lately, I've seen how patriotism can blind us. I've seen how loyalty to the police can blind us. And our own indifference, because we're always tired. We're always tired. Our indifference that protects us from having to expend energy or thinking time will cause us to look away from injustice. When we get comfortable with the status quo, that can make us wrap ourselves up, particularly my tribe, in white privilege, in middle-class insulation, in the insidious comfort of knowing that the police don't beat people like me. We need to wake up to the fact that we cannot allow ourselves to be programmed by the propaganda of the media, the marketplace, the government, the police, and please, not even the church. We say that love is our religion. We need to make religion something that is visible by working for justice in a public way. People, please, if you don't know how to make a video with your camera, don't go to bed tonight before you learn how. Learn how to do it quickly. In the event that you are ever in the presence of police action that involves handcuffing and arresting someone, stop and take a video. Because without it, justice would have been very hard to find in this case and in many others. No one gets any credit for standing idly by and wishing someone well. Please be willing to take the risk to make videos where it matters. And hopefully you never see police behaving improperly. But if you do, don't fail to let the world know about it. Thank you.
Thank you for watching our videos. We are entirely dependent on the donations of our listeners and members. We hope that you find this content to be important enough to help us to keep offering these videos to the public at no charge by becoming a regular contributor. Please click on the donate button on our website at www.spfccc.org. Thank you for your support of progressive religious programming.